TRM. My name is Zissy Turner. First and foremost, have a wonderful and happy Pesach. But before we go into the Pesach festivities, I wanted to give over a Dvar Torah for this week's Parashat Tzav. So, just as a little background, my husband Sam and I got married about 4 years ago, and we live in an apartment building where someone's testing a motorcycle outside, so hopefully you can't hear it. But in any event, my husband and I got married about 4 years ago, and we definitely come from a stuff is love kind of household. So our families loved us very much, so they gave us a lot of stuff when we got married. And some of these gifts were useful, and some of them seemed a little bit pointless. And in the plethora of wedding gifts that we received, we got a little Roomba, which is a small robotic vacuum. And at first, I thought this was a very deeply silly, expensive gift because, first and foremost, I know how to sweep. But from the second that I turned it on, I was hooked. I pressed a button, I left my house, and when I returned, my house was clean. Amazing. I truly did not know how good I had it until one fateful day, it broke. No biggie. I thought, I'll just take my broom and start sweeping. And that's when I remembered how deeply unpleasant sweeping is. I never realized how many nooks and crannies my apartment had, or just how dust can get so stuck deeply underneath a couch. What took my Roomba 15 minutes took me 45 minutes. And in this story about my Roomba, my experience with my broken Roomba makes me think of this week's Parsha. Now you may ask. Well, last week's Parsha, Vayikra, begins with a detailed list of the different types of sacrifices that a person can bring and the laws pertaining to them. We learn about the korbanot, the offerings, the asham, the chatat, the ola. And in this week's Parsha, Tzav, we also learn about korbanot, the offerings, the asham, the chatat, and the ola. The Torah seems to repeat itself, listing once again all of the same sacrifices and how they are to be brought. Contains a large amount of duplication and repetition without any apparent explanation for the redundancies. The reader might think to themselves, well, I have full license to zone out. Why should I care to pay attention to this parsha if in essence I've heard it all before? But the attentive reader can see that there is a big difference. Parshat Vayikra begins with a command to Moshe for Bnei Israel. Daber el Bnei Israel, Hadam ki akriv michem korban. Speak to Israel and say to them, if a person from among you offers a sacrifice. While Tzav begins with a command to Moshe to speak to the Kohanim, the priests. Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav lemor. Command Aharon and his sons, saying, Zot Torat ha'ola, this is the law of the ola, and so forth. These verses are the key to unlocking the differences in the Parshiot. Parshat Vayikra is addressed to the person, the common individual who, motivated by religious passion, offers a sacrifice to God. Parshat Tzav is addressed to the officers of the temple, to Aaron and his sons who must perform the sacrificial protocol. It is the same sacrifice in each case, but the difference is one of perspective. Parshat Tzav is highlighting the experiences of the Kohanim. The Torah is pulling back the curtain to let us see what is going on behind the scenes. And from the perspective of the Kohanim, many different tasks must be accomplished in order for the institution to run smoothly. And that is why this week's Parsha starts with a ritual we've actually never seen before. The Trumat Hadeshen, the daily removal of the ashes of yesterday's korban from the altar. In the beginning of Vayikra, when a person comes to the temple to bring a sacrifice, all he or she sees is a clean and orderly space. The Kohanim working efficiently, visitors attended to in a proper and timely fashion. Everything is functioning as it should. The worshipper's only concern is the sacrifice that he or she is bringing. However, this beautiful setting does not come about automatically. An enormous amount of behind-the-scenes effort is required to make everything look perfect. The priests make it all look seamless for the worshiper. The Torah uses tzav to highlight the experience of the Kohanim because the workers of an institution, perhaps, may have a different, seemingly less glorious perspective of an organization. They know the hard work that goes on into the daily routine. For the temple to function as it should, the ashes have to be taken out every morning, the floors have to be washed, and the Kohanim have to be organized and coordinated. If the ashes on the altar aren't removed or the fire isn't tended to, the temple will not be able to function. All of this, the cleanup and the preparation, is invisible to the korban bringers and not mentioned in Parshat Vayikra. And I think the Torah does this because it is so easy for us as consumers, as recipients of other people's service, to be completely blind to this sort of effort, to maybe think that service is simple. Do we fully understand how much work it takes to keep a house in order, with or without a Roomba? Do we recognize the hard work of our children's teachers, our doormen, our security team? Do we see all of this and recognize it, or do we only notice when something is broken and not done to our liking? This is because the behind-the-scenes work is so easily overlooked. And because of this, it requires extra encouragement. Our parsha opens up, Tzav et Aharon ubanav, command Aharon and his sons. According to Rashi, Tzav means to urge, for now and all future generations. Those who are doing the tireless work behind the scenes deserve and perhaps need encouragement. The work is hard. It can seem never-ending. It can feel like sweeping up the ashes and not like the holy work that it is. As we enter Pesach, our challenge is to internalize the message of Tzav, to recognize the work of others that might go unnoticed. While preparing for Pesach, do we take into account the work our spouses, partners, and friends are putting into it? Taking out the garbage, koshering our kitchens, putting everything in place, preparing for the Sidarim? Do we recognize their service and encourage it? We should. Because in Tzav, the Torah goes out of its way to show the perspective of the Kohanim, the workers, in order to reinforce the message that we must appreciate the people behind the scenes. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, and have a Zissy Pesach.